I believe there's psychological warfare being waged on Americans. Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Hassan, and I wanted to go live on multiple platforms to weigh in on the shooting that just occurred in Minnesota at a Catholic school. And I'm reading and listening to all of the media reports, and I think they're missing some central points that I would like to weigh in on. I will like to start by saying I've uh, exited the Moonies cult in 1976, and I've been studying psychological warfare, brainwashing, mind control for 49 years. And I actually authored an article with ex-Scientologist friend John Atack for an Oxford University Press textbook on lone actor terrorism, with forwards by two former top FBI officials on online radicalization. Much of the textbook was about trying to identify personality profiles and what was in the shooters that became violent. But I have a much more complex systems view on things. And I'm seeing all kinds of posts also that guns are the problem. And certainly guns are part of the problem for sure. We can know this for a fact. We can know this as a fact because Australia banned assault rifles, and guess what? Mass shootings went down dramatically. So we have best policy evidence that it really does make a difference. I might also add that people like the shooter, 23-year-old with a history of depression and psychological issues, bought these guns legally. And that's another issue that I wanted to talk about. But I wrote The Cult of Trump 6 years ago. And when I wrote it, I talked about Russia being one of the major puppet masters of what's currently happening in the United States right now. I talked about psychological warfare known as fourth generation warfare, which was aimed at attacking expert science and democratic institutions, and how Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Christian nationalists, Nazis are trying to polarize the American public, creating chaos and to hate each other and to get to really extreme things. And a big piece of this is the Russian influence around guns. How many people remember Maria Butina and her involvement with the National Rifle Association dinners? How many people remember how many Russians were at the national prayer breakfast of the cult called The Family, a group that I highlight in chapter 7 of The Cult of Trump? Guess what? Putin does not allow Russian citizens to have access to guns or assault rifles, nor does China. But you know what's happening right now with our media in the United States? It's being blasted to the people in Russia and China and all dictatorships. See what's happening in the US? You used to think that this is where you wanted to run away to, this free speech thing. They let people go around with guns shooting children. So people need to understand there's more to this story than just the person who is the perpetrator here. And I want to also share that when I did my doctoral dissertation on updating the law regarding undue influence, I included a model by law professor Alan Shefflin called the social influence model that he created for expert witnesses to explain to judges and juries about undue influence. And he outlined a process where you look at the unique vulnerabilities of the influencee, but you analyze the predator or the predatory organization, and you analyze the influences and the consequences of this influence. And what I'm not hearing in the media yet is apparently there was a lot of writing that the shooter left in Cyrillic, which is Russian. Hmm. How come nobody's talking about Putin as a war criminal? What I'm trying to convey is people are looking for simplistic answers and they largely blame the victim, that there's something wrong with them. And I'm hearing messaging against the trans community trying to say, see, the shooter was trans. But if you think back to 1999 and Columbine, when the first mass shooting happened in a school, and all the shootings since, this was not from trans people. These were white male boys. And when you think about the culture of guns, and violence, and video games with assassinations and violence, this creates a culture of violence. And it's something that I really want people to pay attention to, because another thing I'm missing from the media reports is social media, the negative effects on social media. We know from Jonathan Haidt's book, social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation, he focused on the deleterious effects of social media on young minds and how there's unprecedented depression, anxiety, suicidality, eating disorders, and all kinds of other things. Why aren't we talking about regulating our social media? Why aren't we talking about the fact that there are thousands of data points being collected on people, especially young people, especially on TikTok, which is owned by the Chinese government? Wink, wink, nod, nod. They are using this information and AI to target people. And many people are starting to feel hopeless, suicidal, and violent. And I believe this is a direct result of psychological warfare that's driving us into a direction where there's going to be martial law and violence. It's what Trump is gearing up for, is he wants people to be violent so he can say we have to put the military into all of our cities, especially those left-wing cities. And one more thing I wanted to add in this live stream was when Vance Belter assassinated the Minnesota law official. I'm blocking on her name at the moment, and her husband, and attempted to kill two others. He was radicalized by a right-wing Christian cult that was connected to William Branham. And I did a video interview with John Collins, former third generation member of that cult. And then I interviewed the floor mate of Vance Belter, who was going to baseball practice with him. And he described how his friend had gotten totally crazy. He'd gotten radicalized by this Christian cult. And so I want people to learn about mind control. I want to share my models based on 49 years of research after getting out of a cult myself. And I want you to study the influence continuum graphic. I want you to study the BITE model of authoritarian control. That stands for behavior control, information, thought, and emotional control. I want you to study the characteristics of malignant narcissists, which is the stereotypical profile of all cult leaders. I did chapter 3 of The Cult of Trump, comparing Donald Trump with Jim Jones of the People's Temple Massacre, Hubbard of Scientology, and Moon, my former cult leader who claimed to be the Messiah, and who in 1974, when I was recruited into the cult and escalated to be groomed as a leader, I heard Moon personally say, we need to infiltrate the US government. We need to send people into everybody's offices. God doesn't like democracy. He wants a theocracy. And he even said when we take power in America, we would amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who violated God's rules. This was 52 years ago. And so I'm watching this in real time, trying my best to convey to the public, hey, it happened to me. I was not a violent person, but I was trained to kill or die on command. I would have picked up an AR-15 and shot anyone I was instructed to shoot if I was given an instruction that it was coming from God. And I'm not saying this particular incident the person was claiming to hear from God, not at all. But I'm my take on this is that this person was radicalized, and felt very desperate, and wanted to die, and wanted to make a statement before the death. And it's a tragedy, and I feel horrible. And it's contributing to more traumatization of the American public that things are crazy here. And love, truth, honesty, integrity, real community is what we're going to need to do to stop polarizing and realize we're in an existential moment with the Trump administration's authoritarian moves to destroy all checks and balances and things that the government needs to do to protect our well-being and our health. So that's my statement. I wanted to get out there, and I'm happy to invite people to come check out my Substack, Stephen Hassan, my YouTube channel, Dr. Stephen Hassan. And I have this week on my interview and blog on Substack, Rebecca Lemov, a history of science professor at Harvard, who wrote a book on the instability of truth, on brainwashing, mind control, and hyper persuasion. She calls it hyper persuasion, which is Facebook, X, and other social media platforms that are being used to manipulate people emotionally and psychologically. I think RFK Jr. is off the wall. And my first thought when I heard him say that was that's Scientology's messaging, blaming Prozac and other SSRIs, saying no, that you need to use Scientology methods and that all of psychiatry is evil. I've recently posted on Substack a blog about Maha and some of the patently unscientific claims that are being made. Everything from vaccinations causes autism to raw milk is good when it's not, and so many other things. People need to come back to experts who actually are trained. RFK is not an expert in understanding the Center for Disease Control or for understanding how viruses mutate. He's not, he's doing political stuff to the harm of everyone. Other questions? Yeah, so I appreciate when people tell me to listen to other people who are experts. I'm always open to learning. So next week we have Ann Nelson, who I interviewed about her book called Red Orchestra, about how we did not know there were millions of Germans who actively resisted Hitler during Hitler's reign in Germany. And so that's what's coming up on Monday. It's already up for subscribers to my YouTube channel. We're making it available a week early to them. And the week after that, we're planning to put up Dr. Bandy Lee, my interview with her. And Dr. Lee and I go back years, and we both agree that Donald Trump is unfit to be president of the United States, and he is demonstrating his psychopathology and his dementia rather thoroughly. Right now, we have a million problems that are facing us, And so the gun problem is just one slice of what needs to happen. What needs to happen is next year there needs to be free and fair elections. And we need to have all the people who voted for Trump vote to get Trump and his GOP sycophants out and put real people in. We need to flip the Senate and we need to flip the Congress to have any hope of putting back checks and balances and laws that actually protect people. Regarding what parents can do, I don't think parents should let young people buy assault rifles and shotguns. And anyone who knows a young person who has a history of depression, they should not be, they should take the guns away and make sure that every, official, wherever they are, doesn't sell them a gun. This is part of the regulations that were taken out of place when Trump came to power. And it is really a problem. Talk to people, know your neighbors. Talk if you're a student, get to know other students. Warm engagement, find common ground, and don't just hang out with people who have the same beliefs as you. And be open-minded to consider other points of view. And people should know their value system. Like I really believe, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Like I really believe that and I practice that. I also know enough about myself and about human nature is that people feel better when they're helping other people, not when they're greedy and selfish, but when they're going out of their way to help someone make their life a little bit better. It gives them a boost of happy hormones, and we want to feel better. We want to feel like we have purpose and meaning and like we're contributing to make the world a better place. And so all I can say is start with yourself, your immediate family and friends, and then think about community. And if you're a young person, and when I say young, younger than me, 18 to 35, please come join the Freedom of Mind community, learn how to message, and let's deliberately go out of our way to interact with people who are Trumpers, people who voted for Donald Trump, and start warmly engaging them with curious questions by practicing active listening, because people are doubting and they need a face-saving way to engage with somebody that will get them to start reflecting and reality testing. That's better. What doesn't work, that's back to what it wasn't good. What doesn't work is trying to argue with facts and logic and persuade the person, because as I've talked before, it activates the cult identity to be defensive and to view you as the enemy. What you want to do is get to the person's core, authentic self and get them to reflect and think. And everybody has seen a documentary or heard about a cult story, whether it's Manson. I just did an interview with a woman who's writing a piece on Patty Hearst, who was kidnapped 50 years ago, this coming February. Everybody's heard of cult stories, but nobody's really breaking it down as I have been to explain behavior control, information, thought, and emotional control, and how to protect yourself. And this is one of my biggest gripes with mainstream media is they do what I call trauma porn. They do these sensational documentaries, but they don't leave the listener with any more informed strategies for how to understand it and how to apply that knowledge to themselves. So I've been on every major television show over my career. Dateline, Nightline, Today's Show, Good Morning America, Larry King, Joe Rogan, CNN over 100 times, MSNBC over 100 times. But once the cult of Trump came out, and Brian Stelter interviewed me when it first came out, there was so much right-wing backlash, people got afraid. They didn't want to go into this topic. And when I talked to my publicist at Simon and Schuster, I said, "What's going on? You told me that everyone under the sun wanted to interview me about my book. Now that it's released, nobody's asking for interviews." And she said, "Well, my producer friend said if Stephen Hassan wants to say that Attorney General Barr is in a cult and thinks he can get on TV, he's got another thing coming to him." And I did write about Bill Barr being on the board of directors of Opus Dei in Washington, D.C., a well-known Catholic cult that was saying the last two popes were evil, a group that is being sued for trafficking young people as we speak. And I did a very important interview with UK financial journalist Gareth Gore on his fine book on Opus Dei. Please go to my Substack and listen to my interview and read the blog, because Opus Dei was behind the Federalist Society's hacking of our Supreme Court and Heritage Foundation Project 2025. It's one of the main cults in Chapter 7 of the Puppet Masters of Donald Trump. So it's a tragedy what happened in Minnesota. It's a second tragedy involving shooting deaths of innocent people for political purposes. One, a right-wing person going after left-wing, and I don't even like left and right anymore. It's authoritarianism versus human rights and rule of law is how I prefer to discuss things. Please consider coming to my Substack and subscribing, and please consider joining my YouTube channel as well. And if you think what I'm saying makes sense, share it with friends, share it with a neighbor, a family member, and ask them to watch it and what do they think about it. And I still think all this writing in Cyrillic is kind of a flashing red light, a flag about Russian undue influence. And remember Maria Butina. She's now a parliamentarian in Russia. She infiltrated the United States and the NRA. Yeah, I encounter that all the time, and all I can say is practice active listening and ask the question, I really would like to know what evidence would you consider that would change your mind, that would allow you to consider what I'm saying is factual. Would it be a former CIA head of Russia saying that Russia influenced Donald Trump? Former KGB official Yuri Shvets, who I interviewed for 2 podcasts, who said, I was much higher up in the KGB than Vladimir was, and it was a matter of policy for the Soviet Union to recruit Western businessmen like Donald Trump. And he said he was recruited in 1987. And Donald Trump came back from his trip to Moscow and took out a full-page ad in the New York Times saying NATO should be dissolved. Do you think he had that idea before he went to Moscow, that NATO should be dissolved? Have you seen the videos of the meeting with Putin? Did he treat Putin as if he was a war criminal who invaded a country and is bombing civilians to this day? There's more. I wrote about it in The Cult of Trump, but read Craig Unger's books, Active Measures. I think it's House of Putin, House of Trump. Talk to people who are in the intelligence field who are talking and saying, and read the Mueller report. The Mueller report documented Russian interference with the 2016 election and named names. So what works for people? And really Trump and Putin has done a masterful job drilling into people's heads that there's no Russian influence. But that doesn't make it true just because you say the big lie over and over and over again. And I want to repeat, You can't have assault rifles in Russia or China. You'd get arrested. I was told if the police found a bullet in one of your cars, you would be arrested. And yet they have agents working in the US going, we need our guns. We need, the Second Amendment. And we have 19 million assault rifles in the United States. Why? Because Russia and China wants Americans to kill each other. It's a very cheap way to fight a war. They want to take over the world. They don't want America to be the world power anymore. They want to destroy the US dollar and the US economy. Just look at the behaviors. Get out of disbelief and shock. And yes, we've been predicting this for years. There's a war plan that was developed over 50 years. I mentioned before about me being in the Moonies and hearing the plan. And for those who think that the Moonies have gone, Moon's sons live in Pennsylvania, and one has a gun cult, an AR-15 gun cult. Go to rodofironministries.org. And the other has a gun factory. And before the election, they were having these festivals with Michael Flynn, Russian connection, to recruit people and to train them how to use guns to kill Americans. This is the Moonies. And Mrs. Moon paid Donald Trump $2.5 million a few weeks after January 6th coup attempt. These are all facts. I'm a forensic expert. I have to tell the truth. Otherwise, people will not believe me and trust me. I am telling you facts. And knowledge is power. If you don't understand who's the enemy and who's behind Trump. Oh, and Susan Wiles, his chief of staff, was a paid lobbyist for Putin and Xi before she was asked to run his 2016 election with hacked information from Cambridge Analytica. Susan Wiles. So you don't think she's giving Trump instructions of what to say and what to do and where to go and what? Come on. And what I'm seeing now is as Trump gets more and more demented and unwell, and the Epstein files is not going away, they're trying to groom Vance to be accepted by the American public. You're seeing Vance standing next to Trump more and more. The question is, will Americans follow Vance? And, the bad actors are counting on it. You know who put Vance in place? Thiel and Musk. The tech bros, Zuckerberg, the people who don't want any government regulation, any protection of our data. They have their own agenda of world hegemony. So there's lots more to say. I'm going to sign off right now. I just want people to understand there are many former members in the United States and around the world, people who've escaped dictatorships. They know how bad it is. We need to be speaking about our experiences and normalize it to the public. We need to explain how it worked and how they want us to self-censor, how they want us to cower in fear. And they're going to want us to turn our family and friends over to the authorities. That's coming down the pike. And I said months ago, start talking to your family and friends who are in the military and ask them, are you willing to kill Americans if you're told to go on the streets and shoot protesters? And people said, are you kidding? No one's ever going to ask them to do that. We already saw the Marines deployed in LA. And I'm starting to hear more military on social media saying, I swore an oath to the Constitution, not to Donald Trump. And that's what we need. We need military to not obey a fascist dictator who wants to destroy the Constitution and our democratic ideals. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to sign off. Take care, everybody, and come to my Substack, Stephen Hassan, and my YouTube channel, please, Dr. Stephen Hassan, and learn and come join us. We need all the help we can get to get the messaging out. Thanks.